So thank you, Richard, for accepting our invitation. Our purpose is to ask you some clarifying questions, and because the Jinkies have arrived to Hungary, they are here. The book is available. We have the profile. We have a website, and more people get interested, and they are discovering this beautiful wisdom, and they are having questions. My first question would be: so how would you describe the Jinkies? How would you recommend to newcomers? How is it different from other contemporary spiritual teachings available?
The one thing that newcomers need to understand the most about it is that it's a wisdom, and it's a wisdom as opposed to a knowledge. So many systems that we engage with are knowledge systems. So we're taking them in through our mind and we're learning about them, and it's putting more information into us. And the Jinkies is not designed like that. It's never been like that for me. It's always been a wisdom, and when I say wisdom, it's like a living transmission. So it's a living. Well, transmission is quite a good word because it's something in the ether. So it's something that's alive inside each of us, and if we attune ourselves to it, then it begins to go to work inside us. So that's the first thing I'd say, and that means that it's a little bit trickier to understand in the beginning and let go of all the questions that you have, and you can hold your questions, but that seeking kind of, I need to know what this is about, I need to understand, that kind of hunger that we have. Because this is a wisdom, it takes time to absorb, and it's the body that has to give us the answers, and it's our inner insight that has to give us the answers, rather than a teacher, and rather than a book, or rather than something external. The book or me or anything you listen to, it's just pointing you back inside yourself, so that you can find for yourself what is the insight that comes from inside you, because your insight is completely unique to you, and so it's not something I can or any teacher can give you. That's the first thing. And then the second thing I'd say is that the Jinkies is a synthesis, and as a synthesis it draws from many different cultures and teachings and teachers, and it's absorbed many different elements into itself. So it's, in that sense, it's very exciting, but it's also a bit like a labyrinth because it has so many strands to it. And so you need to approach it in the spirit that you might approach a labyrinth, with a kind of excitement, and hopefully there won't be any minotaurs in there. But it's not that kind of labyrinth. It's the labyrinth. It's a journey, and as the journey takes you, then the teaching comes alive in you, and there are alleys and corners, and you have to find your own way through it. It's not a kind of modern teaching that gives you a how-to. It's not a how-to, prescriptive teaching. It's something that puts the responsibility for awakening onto you, so you find your intuitive way through the labyrinth. And that's what makes it a little bit different and subtler, and easier in one sense, but also harder for the Western modern mind with its need for logic, because some of those things we have to wait until those answers come from within us. But I also understand, obviously, at the beginning of something new, people have many, many questions, but that's the first thing I would say, is to approach it in a spirit of adventure and with patience, and with the understanding that this isn't something that is going to supply ready-made answers from a shelf somewhere.
What works best to approach it? What is your experience, and how can individual contemplation that you speak about a lot, how can group work and working together with people, changing experiences, how can this enrich the process?
Well, as you said, the central technique, I'll start by calling it a technique, that helps you enter into this wisdom, is called contemplation. And contemplation is one of those wonderful words that has many dimensions. It needs unpacking, and you're not necessarily going to understand it right away, what it means, because it has these different levels. But the first level of it is certainly intellectual and mental, and visual, because you see the gene keys, you see your profile, you look at things, you see the words, and then you begin to take those words and those frequencies inside you, and your mind begins to work with them, and also your emotions are kind of trying to have some relationship with the knowledge, with the wisdom. And so all of that is going on, plus it's also coming into your body, and many people will, for instance, given me stories about how when they read the book, they have very physical experiences. And that's the same with many different teachings, but particularly the gene keys, because it's coded, in this very extraordinary way to match the DNA inside us. It has this universal coding. So contemplating it on our own is the beginning. It is ultimately a personal, individual journey, and I've set it up in that way. I have been the first journeyer, if you like, quester into the labyrinth of this particular version, and I'm still very much in the labyrinth. I love being in the labyrinth. When you're in there, you see all these interconnections, and the wisdom comes alive around you, as I said. So that's the first stage, is to go in on your own and to enjoy your own relationship with the wisdom. And once you begin to get the feel for it and you have some insights, and it begins to sink a bit deeper than just your mind, and it begins to move into your emotional body, into your emotional awareness, and it begins to impact your relationships around you, and it begins to hopefully improve things, giving you more patience, for example, giving you more understanding of your own shadow patterns, giving you a deeper sense of compassion for what's going on in the world. Over time, these are the kind of things that happen through working with the gene keys. Then a natural impulse is to want to study it with others, and I really encourage that. And if you can study it from the beginning with others, of course, and you need to continue your own individual strand at the same time. So because when you're working with a group, it can be a small group, it can be just in a relationship with one other person, then the energy flows obviously in a different way. It's dynamic. You have a listener, you have a witness or a group of witnesses to your process, and you can learn in a very rich way through that. So I really encourage that if people feel that they need a bit of help near the beginning, then I think that's a wonderful way. And to have someone like you, Kati, or you, Vera, to help guide them in the beginning can be a really helpful thing. Just not as a teacher, but as a guide, as a host in a way, just to host this transmission, this wisdom, so that people can see it at work. I mean, I think that's a very powerful way to go into it.
How do you see the transformative effect of the gene keys? How do they relate to present changes in society, in the world?
That was part of it, like the political changes in Europe and across the world. So which gene key plays a particularly important role according to your intuition or sense, like these days, in the soup?
Well, first thing I'd say is that there's always, whenever you're born in this wonderful kind of evolutionary story, it's always the most transformational time that you believe you're in. Because everything is always changing and moving and shifting. In fact, it's one of the most peaceful periods in many ways that the world has known when you look back at history. And within that, there are obviously huge changes and huge problems and sufferings that's still very much present. And a lot of these things are moving through the European, sphere, and we're all very much involved in kind of following that, especially people in Europe. But it's not just Europe. Obviously, it's the whole world. With in the USA and the rest of the world. And so there can be a fear that comes up when you become attached to where the story is the evolutionary story seems to be moving, especially when it seems to go into a retrogressive period, like it is at the moment. So what appears to be a retrogressive step or series of steps can bring up a lot of fear and worry, and are we going backwards? Are we moving away from unity? And I think that there's always a deeper a deeper wisdom at work in the world that we can't see. And one of the things, as you approach a more unified state, one of the things that occurs for the individual is you have to throw out the shadows. You have to see your own shadows individually. And it's the same when you apply it globally through whole gene pools. The shadows have to come up, and those fears have to come up so that we can address them. We can really look and go, well, do we want to go in this direction? And at the core of the gene keys is this notion of this trinity of their kind of principles, which I'll talk about probably a little more. And I call them synarchy, synthesis, and syntropy. And the gene keys, I already said, is a synthesis. It draws from all the traditions, main wisdom traditions. Just as DNA unites all human beings, it's the one language we all have in common, because we all have exactly the same gene, come from the same DNA. And then you have something called synarchy, and synarchy is the higher principle of humanity operating in harmony. But one of the things about that is, it was one of your patriots, who I'll maybe also talk about later, Hamvash. He was the one that said, look, the purpose of human life isn't actually the creation of unity. It's the accomplishment of harmony within multiplicity, and that's a different thing. So we need to be different. We need to have our cultural differences, and we need to separate. We need to sort of distinguish ourselves in order that we can find that harmony of the different notes that we're all sounding. So I don't see the current period as a negative thing at all. I see it as a sort of sorting period, where each culture and each individual culture needs to find its own uniqueness and needs to find its own gift. And you asked about, well, which gene key? I don't have a specific gene key to describe the whole thing, but what's of interest is that each nation has a gene key, or has a kind of particular pitch, has a particular shadow, and has a particular siddhi, what I call a siddhi, a higher essence, a spiritual vision that is actually in the people, and it's in the DNA of the people, in the gene pool. And so it's a great, it's a wonderful thing to discover what that is, and I don't have a set way of discovering it. I think that is best discovered from the people who are in the nation itself. So, for instance, when I went to Romania last year, a couple of years ago, we actually did a profile of Romania, and the gene key that came out there was the 13th gene key, which was about empathy, and it had a deep resonance for them. And so I have, in my journeys around the world, been kind of looking at, well, what might the gene keys be for different countries, for different nations. And it's kind of fun. I don't take it very seriously, and I don't think it needs to be taken very seriously, but it's interesting to note just that we do have specific shadow patterns as nations, and those need to be thrown up so we can address them. And I think that now is a perfect time for those kind of things to be happening.
Yeah, you need like a giant trust, I think, for all that what you just said. Mm-hmm. Like you trust that everything is just really good the way it is, and then we are just boiling in the soup, and then at some point it will lead us.
Of course. I mean, it's a funny thing that, personally, I was born, I think we all were born with that trust. And personally, I never lost my trust, that deep trust. Mm-hmm. I mean, there have been times when, yes, maybe I lost it for, 10 minutes or a week maybe. in one of those difficult bardo times that we go through. But somewhere in this transmission, deeply buried in the wisdom and in all wisdoms, the perennial wisdom, is this fundamental trust that life knows what it's doing, that there is a divine source that is moving us towards this higher harmony. And because we are a shifting wave of consciousness, and we're growing and we're evolving. That's what evolution is. We are evolving. And of course there are fears like, well, what happens if we extinguish ourselves, and what happens if, the bottom line is that we are immortal. But not these bodies, but what's beneath it, the impulse, the love that's inside us is immortal. We can't die. It can't die. Never. And for us to focus on that is a seed that really deserves to be watered every day. And that's what the Gene Keys is all about. That's what this whole thing is about. You take that seed and you look in your profile and you find those seeds of immortality inside you. And then you water them, and you water them, and you grow them. And you grow them as individuals, but we also grow them as groups. And that's what the synarchy is. That's what as we begin to move into these harmonic patterns where energy is flowing between us and love is moving us. And so I hope that kind of answers the question a bit.
If you also see the value in political activism, like, I think it's rising that people are kind of take charge for themselves and started to move the things and question the things. So like, how do you see these, political changes?
Well, it comes back again, as you said, to the individual. So in order for correct action to occur, to come through us in the world, and when I say correct action, I mean like action in harmony with the universe, or action in harmony with the Tao, what the ancients called the Tao, action that is harmonic, that kind of presupposes that you have a level of awakeness inside you already. Otherwise, your activism is going to be reactivism. It's actually you're just reacting to another set of circumstances, and your energy is going to propagate the same patterns again. So I've heard these questions to teachers many, many times, especially, when I've listened to enlightened teachers, and people often ask these questions. And the question that I often hear come back, the same response, is if you're not awake inside yourself, how can your action do any, it can't actually reach out and hit the right place in the right way. So I would say activism, yes, but only if it comes from love. And I don't mean soppy love. I mean, like, it's got to come from your own ecstasy. It's got to come out of your own certainty, your own deep trust. And then you're not kind of fighting. You're then delivering this transmission of love. You're delivering this transmission of justice, but you're not delivering it in an aggressive way. In fact, the opposite. You're delivering it in a very gentle but very powerful way. The way a parent might speak to a child, that has gentleness but deep firmness of conviction. That this comes from a place of real power and love inside you. And then that kind of activism is, it can do anything. It can do anything.
Maybe we are bound to go through, all those kind of changes. So maybe, in this life, you can't hit that warm-hearted activism yet, but, you start evolving and doing something. Yeah. I mean, that's what I see mainly. But of course, you don't see maybe those people, who are like acting inwardly.
No.
Not.
But it's essential, because otherwise you're distracting yourself from what's essential. And as I said, you're just propagating this loop, of fighting, rebellion, reaction, action, reaction. And it doesn't go anywhere.
Well, this brings us to our Hungarian atmosphere of continuous inner fighting. So Hungarians are very divided and have been divided really throughout their history. There has been always a faction who are the traditionalists, and we are maintaining our traditions. And there are these liberal, open, progressive, in present day it's more pro-European and pro-Western forces. But it's really a very deep tradition between these two senses of looking at the world. And we even have this notion of this curse of Turan. And so I'm curious to hear your idea. How can we, and is there any specific jinki, or just what could help us to really overcome this hatred? It's actual real deep hatred for the closest people we have with the same language, same culture, and really there is so much hatred in these people, and so if you can in any way give us some hope and
yeah, there's always hope. There's great hope. Wherever there's oppression, there is great hope. And more than hope, there is great light. And so if I were to choose a gene key for this conversation, that might apply, I might say the 47th gene key, which is the shadow of oppression. And it's also the shadow of oppression that's caused by ancient ancestral DNA, the memories that the DNA of the people hold, the memories that, that keep us from progressing, from escaping, so it's self-oppression, actually. It's our ancient memories that cause us this idea that we're cursed, but the gift of that gene key is called transmutation, and it's about alchemy, and it's alchemy through love and through forgiveness and through grace, and so as a nation, if you look at an individual again, I always apply it back to the individual. Like you begin by looking at, well, what are your gifts? What are the great gifts? What are your cities? What are your highest possibilities? And you bring your energy there. You don't focus on the shadow so much. You look at that, but you maybe only give it a small percentage of your awareness, and you're honest about it. But then you work on the gifts. So you are, the Hungarians. I love you. I love your nation. You're a nation of lovers to me. You're lovers of food. You're lovers of wine. You're lovers of friendship. You have this great humor, and you have this immense depth. Of understanding and looking at and this history and all of that. So I would say, the only way you can break a curse, is with a blessing, and that's the only thing that has the power to break it. And you actually have to bless the thing that caused the curse. So if it were a person, you would bless that person. You would bless those ancient enemies that you hold inside your DNA, because they're all in our DNA. They're all part of us. And so the traditional view has to be honored, and it has to be brought with the new. So the progressive and the traditional, they both need each other. You can't throw one out. So you have to love your way through it. So when you look at that 47th gene key, you see that it's paired with the 22nd. So in a way, the heaviest gene key is paired with the lightest. And the 22nd gene key is grace. So those who suffer the deepest, they suffer because they have a huge reservoir of love to transmute, and therefore they have the greatest blessing in a way. So you can't, the trick is not to blame something outside yourself, and that's what we want to do. Is we want to blame, like, my upbringing, my parents, some guy that cursed me thousands of years ago, whatever it is, anything but assuming full responsibility. That's what we have to do, is all of us as individuals, we assume full responsibility for our own karma, for our own, difficulties and challenges. And then we meet it with our gifts. And that's and we bless ourselves when we do that. So we have to free ourselves as individuals, and in your case as a nation, that's how it works. You free yourself. So I can imagine like some kind of wonderful national blessing would be really powerful. You know, to let go of those notions that, you know, that there is some kind of something outside us, you know, that we are a victim of.
Victims, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's not the case. You know, there's great blessings to be found in these dark places.
I think that's probably the hardest to step over, like this victimized state. As far as I feel, like we always somehow put ourselves back into this miserable state, like, yeah, but then we had this and that, and it's so hard, and nobody has to suffer like us, and then it's like a loop of like, So maybe it's really good where we are now, because then we are like forced to step out of it, because it's really like kicking us. I feel so. I really can resonate to what you just said. You know, like that's the only way. Like it gets just too much, then you stop and then you laugh and then you move out of it. Like, oh, that was it. You know, like,
it's only as heavy as you make it.
Yeah. I think we are good at it, you know, to make it harder. Then it hurts
really. Yes.
Yes. You really have to suffer.
Yeah, Richard, and then you mentioned several times that you have heard about Hanvas Béla and that you admire him, or I don't know how can you speak about how you see him and what you
I Hanvas Béla, I think it was Vera, maybe you introduced me to him, to his work, and I'm very grateful for that. I've studied as much as I can of his work in English. Obviously, I'm not going to learn. I won't have time to learn how to speak one of the most difficult languages in the world, Hungarian. So I'm relying on translations. But his insight, his genius is just vast, and I think he's a symbol of what lies in the Hungarian culture, you know, in your DNA. I think because he was like a polymath, you know, like a genius across many fields, and a very humble man, but a very bold, kind of wild man as well. And what I love about him is his incredible poetic nature that merges the highest mystical heights with the deepest mundane, sensuous human experiences. You know, and to me he seems like the consummate lover. You know, a man that knows how to love everything. And not, you know, of course you can't help but be impressed by his vast intellect, but that's not what impresses me the most. It's really this totality of love, where he will, you know, he will go right into the most distant part of time, and then draw on these streams and transmissions of wisdom, and then bring them alive and make them palatable and make them understandable for modern people. And so, yeah, he's an extraordinary man, and even more so that, you know, many of his greatest works, I think, were possibly even lost, because he lost a lot of his writings. So, you know, all of that genius is kind of latent within the Hungarian race, I think. It's just waiting for people to tap into that inner genius that's there. There must be something very deep in your DNA in order for that, for him to have, and he's not the only genius, obviously, to come from Hungary, but he's one that I really have, you know, I hold him in the highest regard. I'd like to, in time, I'd like to introduce him to more and more people in the rest of the world, and so I hope that's one of the things I'm going to do in the future.
And no wonder that he was repressed. You know, like I think average Hungarians actually they don't even know him.
No.
So he's not taught in schools. Can you believe that?
No, not at all.
Unbelievable. You know,
not at all.
Here you have this bright light, you know, and
let's just darken it. He was never existed.
That would change a lot if his legacy was really allowed to burn bright that would really, I think, impact the Hungarians. It would impact the rest of the world as well. My intention is to deliver his teaching to as many people as I can, and so I'm still in the absorbing phase. So that time.
So encourage the translators to work harder.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a juicy one, which is a little bit connected to like you personally, and also if you have any stories where you can tell us about like experiences of life situations where people's life changed significantly due to Gene Keys, either with your own experiences or, somebody else.
Well, I can tell you about my own. Other people's, yes, I hear occasionally, but the funny thing is I actually don't hear that much because I am a bit of a recluse. And when I go traveling and I teach and I meet people, then I hear the stories and things, and I hear people's gratitude. But I don't think it's really my place to talk about other people's experiences. And you can hear them, in the Gene Keys Society and in the anywhere where Gene Keys people are working with the Gene Keys, because they come out all the time. But for my own experience, I would say that for me, working with the Gene Keys has been it hasn't been a bright, explosive life change. It's been a slow, steady burn, where awakening has come gradually, and it has deepened inside me, and it has applied itself to all areas of my life. So. I always talk about patience because it's one of the things that I've learned the deepest, and it's part of one of my primary Gene Keys in my profile, patience and timelessness. And I think it's something that, when you come into a deeper maturity inside yourself, like that trust we were talking about earlier, that universal trust, as that begins to dawn inside you, you just relax about so many things that you used to be worried about. And also you learn, so I've learned specific skills, but not through being taught them. I've learned them through my heart, like how to diffuse issues in relationships, how to hold my tongue, how to not react, all those things that have made my life so much easier. And I've tried to put those into the Gene Keys, into the Golden Path program, the things that I've learned, and I'm constantly learning. But I've learned many, many things that have all together collectively made my life, much more pleasant, and enabled me to deal with conflicts without being afraid or without being reactive, even though I may react emotionally. I'm able to now breathe and not take things as personally. And all those things add up to a lot when you put them all together. So, 10 years with the Gene Keys has hugely changed my life. And that's how long it takes, and it's different for different people. But, when you get hold of something that works, you need to stay with it. And I always say this to people, like, if you just come in and you taste the Gene Keys, that's great. But and if it doesn't really take root in you, then that's fine. Then you should move to something else and find something else and stay with that. Just find something and stay with it. And the Gene Keys is as good as anything out there. And in many ways, it's perfect for our specific time, because it's a synthesis, and it does call on so many different aspects of life and nature and spirituality. And so for me, it's held me long enough to kind of really take root as a teaching that is constantly showing me what wisdom really is, and constantly opening my heart wider and wider. And obviously, life challenges us, all the time. But the gene keys give you the kind of weaponry to be able to like run headlong into those challenges and meet them with an open heart. And that, again, it's just that attitude that changes the person's life. You no longer suffer in the way you did. In fact, suffering when it comes to you can be seen as a blessing. So that's a big shift. There aren't, that's like something really powerful.
Yeah, I can see that really in my personal life.
Good.
And I think, Hanvas Bela would be hooked on gene keys.
Maybe.
I'm thinking.
I would sit down and drink some Tokai with him very, very happily.
Oh, for sure.
Yes. In conversations about the gene keys, the topic of the ego often comes up, and I wanted to ask you about it. How you see the role of the ego in our personal development, on our spiritual journey? How can it inhibit us to really get along, and how can we detect when it's limiting our journey? So do you have any experience with how the voices of the ego can really help us and limit us?
It's interesting that, because I'd like to do a search in the Gene Keys book and see how many times the word ego comes up, because I don't remember writing about it.
There are a few.
No, it's the word, but I don't use the word very often. And the word I use is the shadow. And the shadow is it seems less of a kind of mountain to me, like the word ego and all the baggage that's behind it. It sometimes can appear like this huge mountain. Like, how do we ever, get past the ego and what it really means? So I haven't wanted to make the ego an enemy. I think that's really important. You don't make it into an enemy. I don't even think about it very much, because the real power is to focus on, as I said, the gift. So you focus on kindness and you focus on the goodness in your heart. Because any kind of ego work that you think you're doing, you can pretty much guarantee it's the ego doing it. And that's the nature of vanity. Vanity is such a subtle shadow. And so for me, it's looking at the shadow, because the shadow is something that's cast by by the sun. And so I focus on the sun. And I know the shadow's there, but what the Gene Keys do is they very much allow me to see that shadow playing out, and I don't need to see it, because people just point it out. Like my wife, for example, or my children will immediately just point it out for me, whether through their reaction or something. I just think, oh wow, I must have said that in a certain way that just triggered that response. And there it was, that little bit of shadow where, yes, a part of I temporarily lost my perfect patience, and that I'm so proud of, and then there it was. So yes, that life shows you those aspects, but I try not to make too much of the ego, because otherwise you get into a whole entanglement with, and you get to blaming others, like that was your ego, and so in Gene Keys I encourage people, when they come to work on the shadow, or they come to kind of look at the shadow, only to use that on yourself, so you don't make it your business to know anyone else's shadow. You just use the knowledge, the wisdom for yourself, for your shadow, but you can make it your business to find the gifts of other people. And then you think about those gifts and those higher essences, and then you hold that for them. And that's the work. That's the work of kindness and goodness. And you're sharing that essence for them, and you're holding it for those people around you, instead of like focusing on their shadow. So yeah, you can look at your own shadow, as long as you don't get obsessed by it.
Well,
I think we often have this conversation with Kati. We both carry the 18 Gene Key.
Yeah.
You're kind of bound to see the shadow first.
Right.
Like in everything, and then you like move on from that, but like you can just, you know, not see that.
Yeah, the self-judgment. Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Time for some tea.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Egészségedre.
The pauses are very important, as anyone who comes to the Gene Keys will discover. I talk very often about the importance of pause as a part of contemplation, and everything has to pause in life.
Just becoming conscious that we are alive.
Yeah, and just have that awareness again.
Well, there is one question that came up recently about the Gene Keys Society, which is a wonderful new system organization. I don't know how the synarchy coming alive, and it's so new that when I'm showing it to people and they are reading the values and principles, I have heard people reacting to it. It's like a sect. It's like a religious. It's like a church. And what are we doing here? And then I'd like to ask your ideas about it. How would you describe this society, this idea of getting together like-minded people? How can we learn to?
Good. Yes, thank you. Good question. I for many years I held this off as long as I could. Because I am such, by my nature, I'm a little bit reclusive. Although I am a very, much loved people. But the moment groups of people come together, you have complexity, but you also have, an amazing capacity for vision and for purpose and for, enlightened activity and activism and all kinds of things. So. But things get complicated anyway. So after many years of kind of people wanting to form something, I went through a process with a group of trusted elders in my life who helped me to set up this organism, in response to what is it? It's an organism. It's not an organization. It's an organism. And the thing about Gene Keys is that Gene Keys, because it's not a telling you how to behave thing, and it's not prescriptive, it draws naturally kind of rebellious people. Mm-hmm. So initially I said, we are a harmony of rebels, here. How do you bring rebels together? Because a rebel doesn't want to belong to anything. So an organism is powerful because an organism is something that has to have this freedom at its core. So we formed something called the Gene Keys Society, which is just a group and a place and a website and a meeting place for people to come who are interested in working with the Gene Keys and who want to innovate at different levels. Some people are absolutely working with it every day and they want to make a living out of it. Other people, they just maybe like to come and meet each other and taste it. And so there's all kinds of people who are drawn to it. And the idea behind the society is to kind of have those values. So, we lay down the values, very kind of unusual set of values, if you like, because they're mostly like generosity, patience, they're not the kind of values that most organizations would have, that at their core. So really, it's about it's a community of giving and a community where you're free to come and you're free to go. And part of the third component of synthesis synarchy is syntropy. Syntropy is the universal law whereby generosity of spirit can move when it moves through the synarchy, when it moves through the people with open hearts, backwards and forwards in exchange, without too many contracts and things like that, then you have exponential increase of everything. So the idea is that as you begin to awaken through the Gene Keys, your genius and your life purpose kind of comes awake, then you can network with other people of genius. And that's the vision behind it, is that what happens when you get a whole group of geniuses working together, with open hearts, what things you could do. So when you come to the website, you'll see that the third component is philanthropy, and philanthropy is very much at the heart of the whole vision of not just Gene Keys but humanity. Philos anthropos. It's the love of humanity, and so that's what we are. We have to kind of learn to give again. So it's not a preaching thing. It's just we just put it there right at the heart of our community. And if it's not your thing, then it's not your community. But I think it's I think it's the only way that our planet is going to, that humanity is going to kind of learn to grow to the next stage, which is when we learn to give unconditionally to each other. And so that's the basis of it. A sect. I mean, if any group of people coming together, if that's a sect, then that's a sect. It's not sectarian. There's no great teacher hanging over
Come to join.
Yeah, it's no. There's no great thing kind of leading it. That the teachings themselves are not prescriptive. So there's a lot of freedom and change that's moving through it and maturing. It will have the same kind of shadow issues and challenges as any group of people. But we are doing our best to set up these values so that people kind of have clear reflection of their behaviour from the society, from each other. So it's just a place really for us to come together and exchange, and it's very new. So we're finding our way with it, and this year we're going to release the new ambassador program, which is for people who want to work with the Gene Keys in their life deeper and share it, potentially as a business as well, and to be kind of connected into the core. And syntropy is about also feeding the roots. So if you're a tree, then maybe you might like to, because I've been as generous as I possibly can with the Gene Keys, and I would love for some of those branches that are out there sharing it to be able to drop some fruit back and fertilize the roots. So we want to encourage that kind of sharing so that everyone can benefit, so that the tree can then grow more strongly in the world. So it's a sharing, in that sense. And one of our principles is fairness. So and fairness is something you have to keep looking at. You go, well, if someone thinks this is not fair, then that's a conversation, a dialogue you have to have. Oh, okay, maybe we didn't quite get that right. So that's these principles are not set; they are there so that we have to kind of grow through them. Mm-hmm. So it's a change. It's not a fixed thing. And I think generosity, like every time I hold a course or I always encourage people who are connected to the Gene Keys to be generous in everywhere they go. And generous means to give a little bit more than you're comfortable giving, but there's a thrill in that. And also to give unexpectedly to think, because there's a thrill in that, because you actually you don't give so that you'll receive, but you also know that you will receive, but you don't know where you'll receive from. So if you give from your heart to one place, the universe actually has no choice but to give back to you from another place. So that and that's a magical thing. And the ambassador program that we're going to be running is a magical program that's going to take any people who really want to work deeply with the Gene Keys over years. It's going to take them very, very deep into this kind of realm of magic. And I mean magic with not as a kind of playful word. It's like the magic of the transmission itself. It's very powerful. These siddhis that we speak of are real. They're not just pretty words for us to kind of dream about. They're real. But we have to get them rooted very deeply inside our physical body, so that they...
That's the thing, you need to feel it, and then there's not much explanation you need to do about it, right? I mean, then you don't have those filters anymore working that, oh yeah, magic, okay.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting things coming.
Yeah. So the finale, Vera?
Oh, the finale is now? Okay. Yeah, but we've been talking about all that, but still, like, what is your boldest vision for us people living in 2017 now in this beautiful planet Earth? Maybe that's just the first part, and like going through, you know, all these huge changes, what we encounter. And then again, we talked about that earlier, that probably people, they always think like, oof, it was never, you know, such tough and weird and magical time at the same time. But what is your hunch for now?
Well, I think, you know, I did this, I'm doing this ongoing series called The Ecstatics, where I choose people who have in some way embodied ecstasy, the field of ecstasy, or deep love. And the first one I did was this medieval mystic woman from England, where she lived, called Julian of Norwich. And she's famous for this one saying, and it's all will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well. You know, she really wanted to impress this point. and it is the essence of, I think, you know, this deep trust, you know, that when you have broken through to the core of awakening inside you, when you have reached deep inside your heart and felt what you really are and what we really are, that is the revelation that you experience. Everything is fine. You can relax. Yes, there is a huge amount of suffering. Yes, there is a lot of work to take place. Every culture is moving through great changes. So for us, the great task, in a way, is to be content with the little that we have. You know, if you can be content with the small things, then you really found something powerful. You know, that was how Hamvash saw it. You know, we will change. We will evolve from this phase that we're in. We will reach our highest potential. There is no choice in that. It's a certainty. It's in the cells of our body. That certainty of our final arrival is already there, programmed in. But we have to do the inward work. You know, we've got to kind of find that heart and that love. You know, we've got to be awake to our own self-obsession and our worry. And we've got to move beyond that and serve something greater than ourselves. That's why I was talking about philanthropy. We've got to learn to serve something outside, beyond ourselves. And that's why the symbol of the Gene Keys is the dragonfly, because it is the symbol of, you know, moving beyond the desire realm into a realm that is, you know, where pure freedom lives. And that's what the dragonfly is, the symbol of a creature that lives underwater, that doesn't know anything about the element of air, doesn't even know it exists, because it just lives underwater for 3 years. And then one day it moves through this incredible transmutation where it leaves the water up a stalk, and then it begins to go through this change, and then wings appear from this fish, you know, basically from this predator. And then the wind, once it's dried and it's sitting there, the wind just lifts it. It doesn't even have to push. The wind just takes it. And then it goes, oh my God, what the hell is this? What am I? You know, what is this new element where I have this freedom and this beauty? And that's us. So that is the highest vision for us. That's where we're going. If we know that's where we're going, we can deeply relax through the huge changes. And you know, when I say relax, that doesn't mean we don't have, you know, ferocity inside us to bring about change or to deal with injustice and all those things. But that deep inside us, we are relaxed, even in that very passionate response that we sometimes need to create change, positive change. But inside, we're not attached. You know, we can see that there's a story running, there's an evolutionary story running, and we're part of it. We're part of the poem. And that's the kind of essence of the Gene Keys, is to be your part of the poem, you know, to be your part of the orchestra, and to love it, and to, you know, to focus on the things that are of deep importance, like friendships, you know, like your relationships, like, you know, your relationship to nature, these things that really, really are essential in life. That's it. It comes back to the basics and the essentials. Yeah, the great sweeping vision, yes, but then also the minute focus on the everyday and doing it really, really, really well.
Now, you know, this opened in me something like, it wouldn't be fair if, like, whatever body you are here, whenever time you were like not involved in feeling all this in your heart because of like outer circumstances. And now it just like really hits me, like, of course we just all there, like whatever is happening around us, we can still, you know, be in this really beautiful, you know, moment that, you know, we are in the golden age, let's say. Like, you can always find it. And because I think maybe we expect to feel something around us or see something around us, that the world is like perfect, and now I feel like, yeah, things are working well and and then maybe it's never going to happen. So I mean, maybe this is something, you know, not new, but I just really felt it inside, like, wow, then actually we all allowed to, you know, feel that nevertheless where we are or what is happening around us. So thank you.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a pleasure. Well, I hope that, you know, I think you guys have done an amazing job of setting a foundation for this wisdom to emerge in your culture and in your language. And, you know, I'm going to really kind of pledge my support for you.
Thank you very much, Richard.
And I would love to come.
To Toti especially.
Yeah, I would love to come, and my long-term dream is to come to Hungary and be among the warmth of your people.
Yes. Thanks, Richard. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this interview, and thank you for everything.
Deep pleasure.